Welcome to another edition of the NCBI podcast. I'm June Tinsley, Head of Communications and Advocacy with NCBI. And today on my podcast, I have the pleasure of having a chat with Silvia Maria Crowley, who is a Cork native, moving up to the Big Smoke in Dublin. And she has just been called to the bar. So it's very exciting to hear about her life as a barrister. So welcome, Silvia Maria, and delighted to have a chat with you.
Thank you so much, June. It's so great to be here, and I'm delighted to be able to come and chat with you as well.
Great, great. And I suppose just for the benefit of our listeners, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, of course. Well, my name is Silvia Maria. I'm from Cork originally, from just outside the city centre. So I'm 100% a Cork native, but I've only recently moved up to Dublin now to pursue my lifelong dream of practicing as a barrister of law. So yeah, that's me in a little nutshell.
In a nutshell, great, great, great. And I suppose when you have been using NCBI services for the last number of years, and I suppose if you could just give us a little flavour of some of the services that you've availed of.
Oh, of course, yeah. I actually only started availing of the NCBI services very late in life because I only required them very late in life. And then I linked in with the Cork branch who were so helpful. And Angela was my first port of call, and she helped me with mobility aids and with little adaptive aids for improving and helping with home living and adapting with a visual impairment. And then I also linked in with Brian Manning, who helped me with the assistive technology side of things to try and get some sort of resemblance back to life before the visual impairment.
Perfect. And I suppose, as you kind of mentioned there, you kind of dipped in and out as you see fit to get additional assistance or support or advice when you need it.
Well, that's it, yeah. Like I never needed the NCBI growing up because I actually had perfect vision, but I actually had an accident, which is what caused my visual impairment in 2017, and that resulted in me losing the central vision in my left eye as a result of that accident, and that's what caused my my need to avail of the NCBI services. And they've been great since. So now that I'm up in Dublin, I'll be linking up in the Dublin branch just to assist with the kind of orientation and learning how to kind of navigate this new space, because I struggle with the dark and with visual seeing things in the dark. So I'll be linking in with them now to kind of learn how to navigate my new environment.
That's understandable, definitely. And tell us, how did you get on in college in terms of kind of, did you need additional support for accessing books or resources or any of those kind of things?
Yes, I did, and the Cork branch have a great link with UCC and the Disability Support Services up there, and you're assigned your own disability support advisor. Mine was Michelle, and she links in with the NCBI, and they kind of work together in terms of providing supports with people with visual impairment. And between the NCBI, they offered me obviously the book share in NCBI to be able to get all of my books and have them enabled for my dolphin reader and to have them read to me. Obviously, doing law in college, it's quite reading intensive.
Yes.
Everything and all the cases are often quite long. They often involve like lots of hours of reading, and because at the time I was only recently diagnosed with the visual impairment, I had to limit my screen time of actually physically reading it myself, because of course growing up non-visually impaired, I had only ever been used to reading things visually myself,
Yes.
So it was definitely a new learning style to have to adapt to in terms of having everything read to me, and then having to try and process it from that. So that was definitely a journey, but the NCBI was so helpful with like different types of apps that I could have on my phone or on my tablet, and with different types of software to try and help me be as comfortable with the changeover process as possible. And I got the easy reader. I had Audible for like my own personal kind of books because I loved to read. And then they provided access to my law books if they could on Bookshare via the NCBI, and I could kind of download them then to my e-reader as I needed them. And UCC linked in with that, with providing me then with any kind of resources. So they would get books in digital copies to enable me to do that, and they provided me with a CCTV, and they situated one in the library as well for me to be able to use the short-term loan books, which are only allowed out for like maybe 2 hours, to be able to see them and magnify them so that I'd be able to read them. So it was a long journey in college, and obviously they provided me with recordings of lectures, and all my professors and lecturers in UCC, especially in the School of Law, were most helpful and so understanding of my various requirements, especially if I needed like extra time to submit assignments, because obviously the research it took, it would take me a bit longer because I was limited in terms of my time and access to computers and things like that at the time. But they were so understanding, and I think being linked in with the NCBI, I wouldn't have known about all the supports available in college. But without them, I couldn't have completed my course without them. So, I owe them so much.
Well, I mean, to be fair, you've also accomplished all these achievements on your own as well. But I'm heartened to hear that the UCC Access Officer and the professors were as accommodating and supportive, recognising the different formats you needed and allowing those adaptations to be made. Because I appreciate that if you lost your vision quite suddenly as a result of an accident, it was a whole process for you to adjust as well.
Oh yes, 100% it was. Like I said, the accident happened in 2017, and it was late 2018, 2019 before I really began to be able to get to a point where I could actually return to college and return to some sort of learning. And it was a big adaptation, especially for home living, and everything that I was normally able to do by myself suddenly had to be done in a slightly different way, or had to be adapted. There was a lot of adaptations I had to make at home. In terms of my even home environment, which I lived in for years. Yes. And the NCBI provided me with so much guidance, especially Andrew Brennan. She's in terms of the home living adaptations, like they provided me with advice on the types of lighting, because I was suffering a lot from having migraines from very bright light. So I had to get glasses with anti-glare in them, and Angela was great in providing advice on the different types of lighting that would be suitable for the house. And we ordered in light bulbs then, so my mom was thrilled with all the new bright light bulbs in the house. But it's those kind of things which have made a difference, and which have now enabled me to be able to be living in Dublin without the assistance of my parents. But it was a long journey, and definitely something to it's definitely something that needed a lot of work. Needed a lot of work, and needed a lot of ups and downs before we kind of got to some point which was reasonable.
That's fair enough. And I suppose, as you say, now that you're up in Dublin, you've got an exciting new role ahead of you, being called to the bar, and a very busy role. So tell us a little bit about being a barrister and what that involves for you.
Yeah, so it's very exciting. So as you said, I was called to the bar only recently. So I'll be commencing my first year now as a devil first. We do deviling for 1 year. I have a master, that's what they're called, and I'll be his deviling pupil. And my master now is based in the Criminal Courts of Justice. So I'll be deviling with him for the first year coming in this coming October. But obviously, after being called to the bar by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, which was such an honour, I am officially a barrister at law and allow practice in any court of the state. So it's very exciting. So my next year will be all about getting to meet my fellow colleagues and learning the practical ropes as such in terms of being a barrister at law. And I expect to learn a lot from my master. He's excellent, and it's kind of about putting all the training and learning you got in King's Inns into practice, and getting that practical experience of being a trained advocate on behalf of those who require your services. So very exciting.
Oh, I can hear the enthusiasm in your voice. It's fabulous for you. It really is. And what's always struck me is that kind of language that's used in the world of being a barrister, like that deviling and your master and stuff. It's also, I suppose, antiquated really, because I'm guessing it comes from a legacy really of the English system and how that was so prevalent in Ireland when we were under English rule, and yet we still have it. We carry that language today.
Yes, it is, and to be fair, it does sound very antiquated. It does sound very strange. And of course, June, you're completely right. It does come from the English history and tradition, which is where our courts obviously formerly came from, and now kind of do their own thing. But the Bar Council of Ireland have kept a lot of the traditions and have kept a lot of the history that's associated with being a barrister alive and well. And it came originally from the English, as you said, legal system, where it was a junior barrister, which is a junior counsel, was taking on work like undertaking, it was paid work at the time on behalf of a senior barrister, and that's where the whole deviling pupil came from, a master.
Yes.
and such. And it is quite antiquated, but you know, I think it's actually, I quite like it. I like the fact that there's so much history in the role. There's so much history and tradition in the role, and they're the one kind of group that really hold on to it and are kind of reluctant to you know, forget the origins. And you can even see that in our gowns, in our robes and in our tabs, in the traditional court attire. They still have the what they used to call the coin purse at the back of the junior counsel robe, and you know, they still hang on to the robes and the tabs out of tradition and history. But you know, I think it's great because we are now wearing and using the terminology that so many of us before have used.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you feel like you're part of a journey. But obviously I don't call my master by his I just call him by his name. But that's the but that's the official term, is master and pupil, and we're deviling for the year. So but he just calls me Silvia and I just call him Gareth. So it's not that formal in person.
That's okay. And you obviously still need to wear the gown as well, the gown and the wig as well.
No, the gown and the robes and tabs are, of course, mandatory in the court, but the wigs have actually been done away with, for want of a better word. They're no longer mandatory in
Okay.
court anymore, which is, I don't know, is that good or bad thing? I suppose some people liked them, some people didn't. But now, especially in Dublin, you're not required to wear your wig in court anymore. Many people don't. I know Gareth, who is my barrister that I'm going to be deviling under for the year, he doesn't wear his at all, really. And many of the judges don't wear them at all. So when we were called to the bar, even recently there in the Trinity term, Chief Justice Frank Clark wasn't wearing his wig at all. But of course he was wearing his judge's robes. So I opted, we were given the option, we could either wear the wig for the ceremony or not. It was completely up to us, given the fact that they're not required or mandatory to wear in court when you're before a judge. So I opted not to. I opted not to wear the wig and just to go in with just my robes and tabs.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I suppose as you say, it's discretionary. Some people might still want to hold on to that tradition very close, and others are happily to modernize a little bit. So it's very individual. And I suppose, tell us, you're now going to be in a courtroom setting. So in terms of your own visual impairment, is there any kind of adaptations that you feel you need in terms of having a greater orientation of your space, or is there any assistance you need from the judicial system or Gareth in order to make sure that you can do your deviling for the forthcoming year to the best for your advantage?
Well, that's definitely a great question, June, because obviously a visual impairment is for someone having a visual impairment, it's very different from someone who has no visual impairment. And obviously we can do things at different speeds, but we just do things in different ways. And that's the most important thing to remember. Although in this line of work, being visually impaired is not that common, as you can understand, because it's so reading and text heavy, and it's so case heavy, and it involves reading and writing, and it's very traditional in that sense. But there has been a move, especially in the last 2 years, given COVID and everything that's happened with going online, to make briefs and to make court documents and pleadings available online to the various parties to the case. And that will make a huge difference for someone like me who is visually impaired and needs things in a digital format, and to be e-reader friendly, and to be able to use them maybe with, if they were in physical copies with my CCTV, or in a digital format, that would be very friendly for like Dolphin now, or the normal kind of, on my tablet I have my normal little e-reader. So it's those kind of things that will make the difference now for someone with visually impaired. But if you were even talking 2 years ago, that would have been not heard of, digital copies, unless you kind of scanned the physical copies in themselves. So those are the kind of things that will make a difference, and which is what I would require, is having things available in digital copies to enable me to operate to the best of my ability. And in terms of the services from the NCBI now, as I already mentioned, now that I'm up in Dublin, I'll be linking in with them to get some orientation and navigation training, and I'm hoping that they will also assist me in the new building that I'll be based in, which is the Criminal Courts of Justice, to help orientate me around that as well, because obviously I could be there in the evenings, and that would be important to be able to navigate that by myself. So those are definitely the things, and I hope that the people down in the Criminal Courts of Justice wouldn't have an issue with the NCBI assisting me in that regard. So those are the kind of things that will be required from the justice system here. But I'm sure they will have no problem, because they do have a very good access policy and disability policy, and they're very keen on open access to all, to allow everyone to participate in whatever line of work that they want to,
Dead right. And I suppose it is a public building essentially, so it has to be accessible and inclusive for all individuals accessing that building, whether it's judicial, whether it's criminal, whether it's family, whether it's whoever, the public, journalists. I suppose the building in and of itself needs to be accessible.
Of course, exactly. Yeah. So it is, and that's the great thing about our justice system, is that court is always done in public, in the sense that you can go into any courtroom to hear any case that you like whenever you like. The only cases that are prohibited from the public would be family law cases, and those are denoted with the sign in camera, to let you know that you're not allowed in there, obviously to protect the identity of maybe young children and so on and so forth. But yes, of course, justice is always done in public. So, of course, they have to be accessible and inclusive to all members of the public, regardless of what kind of maybe visual impairment or otherwise that they might have.
True. And I suppose, lastly, just to ask you, what one piece of advice would you give to another person who's been recently diagnosed with a sight loss condition, or like yourself, kind of acquired it quite suddenly?
Oh, that's a great question, June. My main piece of advice would be to access the services in your area. Before I had my visual impairment, I knew nothing really about the NCBI or anything that they do or what they provide, except for the fact that I knew that they assisted extremely visually impaired or fully blind people. And when I first had my accident, I didn't think I qualified for their services, because I was like, oh, I'm only visually impaired in one eye, they would help people who would need it far more than I would. But they offer their services to people with every degree of sight loss, whether it's extreme to mild to moderate. they are accessible and inclusive to everybody who has any type of visual impairment, and they're more than happy to help. So my advice would be, regardless of what your diagnosis is or what degree of sight loss you have or impairment, is to make contact with your local NCBI branch and just go in, have a chat with them, explain what your diagnosis is, explain what you feel you need or what you're having troubles with, and you'd be surprised with the little things that they could help you with. Like, there are some things there that I thought I wouldn't be able to do again, and with the help of NCBI and their adaptive equipment and their home living adaptations and aids, I've been able to come back to some sort of normality. So my advice would be to definitely link in with the services and not be afraid to ask for help in anything that you might need.
Fair point. And I suppose it allows me to prompt any listeners who does want to contact our services to phone the info line 1850 33 43 53. And for now, all I can do is wish you the very, very best in your career as a barrister. I hope the whole deviling year you find very, very productive and enlightening. And I'm sure you're going to learn the ropes inside out. And best of luck. And I really I hope it all works out for you.
Thank you so much, June, and thank you so much for having me on today. It's been great.
Thanks.